All right, so let's talk now about the transferable skills. What can you take from academia into the world of jobs? So all of you, you're ready to graduate or soon to graduate, and you're thinking about what kind of jobs you want to have. How do I get one of these jobs? You know, how does the application work and all those kind of things? And many of you might think, well, I know nothing yet. You know, I didn't learn anything about how do I function in the workplace, how do I have client interviews, how do I greet people, how do I work with my manager? You know, you might have a lot of questions and a lot of insecurity. So let's talk a little bit about the transferable skills, because you can be assertive about them. You learned a lot of things while coming to university. So one of them is writing skills. You might have to change them a little bit for certain professions, and we talk a little bit about how each profession has their own jargon and so on. But really, you've got writing skills. You can be assertive about that because you've done your assignments, you passed your assignments. Therefore, you must be able to write reasonably well for a university standard. So that's one of your transferable skills. Presentation skills. You might think, oh, what a pain, we've got to do a presentation. I went to university. I do know you have to do lots of presentations in your tutoring, in your tutored classes. And those presentations are not because the tutor's lazy. The presentations are there so that you get used to doing presentations, to standing in front of people and, you know, study something and then deliver it so that others can understand it and take it in. That is a skill you absolutely need in the workplace, because you need to be able to speak up at your team meetings. Often these days you need to be able to do a PowerPoint presentation. And I tell you, I recruit a lot of people. I'm an employer, really, representative. And for certain jobs, we get people to do a presentation before the interview. So we give them a topic, they come in to the interview, and they do the presentation first, and then we do the interview questions. And the job I went for as a manager in health, I had to do a presentation. Because as a manager, you have to be standing in front of your teams, in front of guests, in front of the lecture room like this one. And you learned this in your tutoring sessions. So, you know, in your tutorials, you did presentations. So put some effort into it, get feedback from your students. You have analytical skills, because you have to write the research papers, you have to summarize them, distill them, understand the argument, reproduce the argument in your assignment, or put your own thinking to it, and you know, focus it and understand it and deliver it so somebody else can follow your train of thought. So you have a lot of analytical skills, and you have research skills. Most of you had to do small projects, interviewing somebody in the community, had to do a project where you had to research a community and then ask some members, had to develop a survey that you sent out, that people respond, Survey Monkey, all those kind of things. So you do have research skills. Apart from the assignments, you also have practical research skills. You know how to collect data and analyze it. You probably look at census data. You learn how to use census data. You learn how to use user data, demographic data, and analyze it. You know the percentage of migrants, for example, percentage of women, you know, work it out of the population percentage, those kind of things. So a lot of applied research you do have. Ethics, that is really important. Issues like conflict of interest. Am I getting too close to this client? Am I being influenced because they're the same culture as me? Is my power relationship too unequal? All those kind of things. Am I abusing the relationship? Are they abusing their relationship? Because that happens quite often. They talk you into something that you don't really want to do, or that's strictly speaking unethical to do. But you don't feel you can say no. So the whole ethical question you would have learned in your assignments, and you can bring that into your job applications in some way. Show your ethical thinking, show your professionalism. Teamwork, lots of group work at university, isn't it? We used to sit for hours outside under the trees, trying to work out who is going to do what we're all thinking about it, how we're going to structure it, who is going to bring the research, who is going to do the writing, who is going to do the interviews and all those kind of things. So you do have learned a lot here about teamwork. And some of the tools of the trade, they might be a little bit limited if you don't do a vocational course, but you can learn the tools of the trade. And a lot of it you would have had from your fellow colleagues as well. Some of you did placements, so you would have learned a lot in the workplace. If you haven't, you can do volunteering. Most organizations in the community services sector accept volunteers. Volunteers are often the same as staff. They get invited to a team meeting. They can get involved as much as they want to get involved. So there's many ways that you can acquire some of those more vocational confidence if you feel you need to. But you certainly learned quite a lot here, even just how to structure an argument, opening sentence, conclusions, paragraphs, structuring an assignment well, all those things. And you did learn to work under pressure. Don't forget that, because quite often in our kind of work, something comes in, we need an analysis in 2 days. Federal budget, straight away we go for the analysis. Looking what's changed for the services sector. What will it mean for the single mothers that will get less income? What will it mean to cut back the pension access test, assets test, sorry. All those kind of things. Immediately as a worker, you go through those kind of things because you can see what is going to be on the horizon for your clients. So don't forget, you have all those kind of skills and also the work under pressure. So just before we go a little bit more into my organizations, because I can illustrate what we need, because I thought it's probably good to do it on a practical example rather than abstract. So this is a little bit more about our organization. So I told you what our programs are, but this is actually what our workforce is like. And so you can see some of the strategies that we have to use, but also we employ a lot of people like you are. And so I'll share afterwards how we look at employment and at recruiting. But here is a bit of an overview of our organization. So we have a very diverse workforce. And we have now probably about 400 staff rather than 336. So that slide is a little while ago. And you can see how we've grown from 76 to 253 and then to 336. It's a very large organization. We have 24 locations really in New South Wales because we look after those settlement organizations as well. Our male-female is 66% females and 34 males. That's actually not so bad because some of the other industries in the community services sectors have many more women. So that percentage is not too bad. In the middle is our languages. So we speak about 83 languages in the organization, so very culturally diverse. And we have a lot of bilingual guides and volunteers as well that speak other languages. And we are a very young organization. So we actually have almost 30% of our staff are between 20 and 30 years old. So a lot of graduates, actually. A lot of people that come out of uni, new or out of TAFE with a community services course. Because we appreciate the culture and the language they bring, especially if the language matches with the language of our clients. And then another 30% is between 30 and 40 years old, and then it tapers down. So I'm in the 18%, which is very rare, really, because we also do have an aging workforce in other community services industry, but this is quite a new organization, or its growth is quite new, and we were growing really fast last year and the year before, so we needed to have a lot of staff. So a lot of them are people like you that are fresh out of uni. So you sort of think, okay, well, what sector do I want to go in? What should I look at? And so you might have some ideas, like my mother said, you're good with kids, why don't you work with kids? You might be able to ask questions yourself like that and say, well, what am I really good at? What do I enjoy? Maybe I can do something that I enjoy that relates to my hobby, that sort of thing. You know, some people might say, I really enjoy working with disability. My own brother is disabled, so I know something about it. So that's where I'll start. So, you know, you can work those bits out yourself. But then there's a big question, will I go into a non-government organization or will I go into government? Because there are some fundamental differences in how the two work. So an NGO is often about social justice and addressing social justice, working with structural disadvantage, trying to improve things for people. Government often is about essential services. Yes, they also try to improve things for people, but it's more about they have to. Like, we've got to pay pensions through Centrelink. We've got to make sure that the right people get the money, not the wrong people. So we've got to make sure that they don't try to cheat it, for example. So it's quite often about essential service. We have to deliver health services. People get sick, they need to be treated. So it's much more about essential services. The other services, they usually pay NGOs to deliver. NGOs are also cheaper, so we do often do things on a shoestring. The hierarchy is quite different. So usually in a non-government organization, the hierarchy is quite approachable. Might be a little bit different for-profit because there's other motivation there. But generally speaking, a non-profit and a non-government organization, often the hierarchy is much more approachable, the manager. Even in our organization, people can email the top manager from any position, right? The chief executive. In government, there's strict layers. You go to your boss, then they go to their boss, then they go to their boss. And you kind of don't approach a boss too ahead in the hallway with an issue. You say hello, you're friendly to them, but you don't really approach them and say, oh, by the way, Bob, you know, I've got this issue, what do you think? You don't. And you certainly don't do it without informing your manager first that next time when you see him, you'd like to bring this up. Then the manager might say, good strategy, I support you. But if you didn't inform them, don't expect them to support you because you went behind their back. In NGOs, people are much more, it's kind of much more diluted who sits where. I mean, sometimes, you know, I might say, oh, next time, please, can you inform me about that so that I don't, you know, so I can support you, you know. But I'm not going to say, please don't talk to anyone else, only me, you know. So it's quite different. Decision making, often it's bottom up. Everybody's included, we are consultative, we want to know what you guys think before we make our final decisions. And we certainly want to do that with the community. We certainly would want you to be out there and ask the community what they think. And when you run a coffee morning tea for single mothers or whatever, we would want you to ask them what you want the program to be, what you want to look like. Is this a good meeting place? Do we need childcare? You know, are there any things you want to learn? And so on, okay? With government, it's usually top-down and more the interest of the system. It's got to be efficient. You know, it's got to be costing as little as possible. Got to make sure duty of care and all those kind of things. We do duty of care as well, but we don't necessarily oppose it, impose it from the top. So it's much more coming down from the top than in the community organization usually. I said already before, there's usually greater flexibility in the NGO around part-time work, around taking time off, around studying, flexi time, those kind of things can be quite different. In government, some of that is possible, but you have to negotiate it, and it's not always easy. For example, in my last job, I had a boss that simply said, I want all the managers to work full-time. That's it. In a community organization, you often can job share with someone, and it's quite, excuse me, and it is quite common to job share. The management drivers, what drives management? In an NGO, it's much more about collaboration and working towards a common goal. While in government, it's often by rules. management by rules. And there's copious policies that you have to follow. And the ultimate responsibility, and this is quite important, and I think the government has something over the community on this one. So in the ultimate responsibility in a community organization is a management committee, usually from the local community. So there's the whole democracy element, and they understand why we want to make this decision, and they're usually really good at making decisions for the benefit of the client. Government, not necessarily, but what government has is a politician, and the politician is scared of anything negative or anything that could affect their vote. So essential services, that's why we say, particularly in sociology or people that are politically minded, that essential services need to stay with government. Because if you can have a politician that then is going to lose their job if they mess it up, you have a better chance to achieve good health care, for example, than if you contract the health care to a private provider and the government just says, look, it's not our problem, you need to go and see the board of the private hospital because they make those decisions, because we got nothing to do with it. We only give them the funding through Medicare. You can see the difference? The politician is going to run scared if something goes wrong. I think it's really important to have that. Job security in community services, there's less job security in the NGO sector. Of course, government used to be, you've got a government job, you're staying there for the rest of your life. That has changed also. So a lot of jobs are not secure anymore, but they're probably a little bit more secure than the community sector, where every 2 years or so you lose the grant again. Or you might get it, or you might not get it. You might get a grant for 3 years, but you don't know whether you're going to get another year and another 3 years or not. So it's much more fluid in that sense. So it depends a little bit, again, on your personality and what you need. Some people cope quite well with having 2 years. It brings opportunities too, because you don't need to resign. You can plan for after the 2 years, for example, because the job might come to an end anyway. And time-limited jobs can be quite good for trying something out. And then if they say, why did you leave the previous job? You can say the funding came to an end. Now I'm thinking I'm trying this. Very good rationale. And kind of logical why you left. Even if you left and it didn't work so well, that's still a logical reason to leave, and everybody will understand it. And actually you'll get the sympathy note. It'll be like, oh, you poor thing, yeah, that's only a 2-year program, isn't it? There you go. You got an extra step up the ladder. And then it's, of course, you can hear that, it's less bureaucratic. And government is quite bureaucratic. But I have to say, being a big organization like we are, that I just showed you before, we're also becoming more bureaucratic in some way, because you just have to, because how else can you have a standard of working across 400 people without kind of implementing some rules around it of what is a good standard? If you're in a small organization with only 10 people, you see them every day. You see how they work, and you can pull them aside and say, oh, by the way, with your next client, why don't you try to give the client a little bit more power to say themselves what they want to do? But with 400 people, I have no chance to have those conversations. So I'm reliant on my manager to have those conversations, and they're reliant on a team leader to have good conversations. With you, for example, if you're starting out. So we need to have more rules about what's it look like for a team leader to have a good conversation. We have to train them to have a conversation the way we think it's a good conversation. So you can see how we then have to become a little bit more bureaucratic. But we're trying to still have that kind of vertical thing where people can go wherever, horizontal or vertical, and they can approach me even though I sit pretty high in the hierarchy. And I make an effort to kind of get to know them, doesn't matter who they are. So it's, you know, you try to still get that sort of atmosphere into your organization. I said before, when we talked about writing skills, and that I'm confident that you have good writing skills, because that's what you're learning here. You've done your assignments, you pass at university level, so you must be doing something right. Okay. I also said we might have to adjust the writing a bit. This is the kind of thing that you have to think about. in terms of adjusting your writing, particularly when you look at writing a job application, so that they get a sense that you know what you're talking about. I get a lot of job applications where the criteria just goes, oh yes, I have experience in that. Like say management skills. They might say, yes, I've managed the Women's Health Project in Cumberland, so I got management skills. And I'm going like, well, I've seen that on your CV already, that you managed this group. You've got to give me something about management that makes me think that you understand what management in a community organization means. So I listed a few jargon things here. And the jargon alone, of course, is not going to do it if you don't understand what sits behind the jargon. But as I said, I've moved to this organization only about a year ago, and I was amazed at the jargon that they're using. So, of course, I've learned some of it. So let's just have a look at some. So these days we say we need a narrative. And actually, your lecturer, Irina, she used it too today, that word narrative. First she called it a story, then she changed it to narrative. Yes, these days we don't tell a story, we have a narrative. Bit the same thing, but we use it particularly for political purposes or for a decision that we want to explain to the staff why we made the decision. So we go like, let's get the narrative right. Let's have a look how we're going to sell this. Or with social media or media in general, you want to make sure that the narrative sits. So that's what we really mean. We don't mean just telling a story, but we also mean getting it right and for the right purpose. We socialize an idea, meaning we've got a decision that we think staff might not, it might not go down that well, or they need to get used to the idea, even if it goes down well. But it means really kind of disseminating an idea and listening to people, what they think about it. So it's socializing idea. Like you're the social group that we work with, our staff, and we make them getting used to it. So reflective practice. Now that's an important one that you have to understand as a concept. It's not new, but in the industry we probably haven't used it as much as we could have. And that's really about you thinking about yourself and your actions. So say you had a difficult case with a client, for you to go back to yourself and with others to think about how you could have done it better. What was it that you contributed for it to go as it went? Because you could have changed something. Yeah, sorry. So the question down here was about self-reflective assignments and whether I could just write that into my application. And my answer would be, yes, absolutely. But don't just say, I've done self-reflective assignments. You've got to actually say, we practice self-reflection through assignments, group discussion, and what I took away from there is, and then you kind of describe a little bit what it meant to you and what sort of changes you made as a result of the reflective practice. And, if you did well at it, then say so. But if you're a bit mediocre about it, then just say, and it's something that I'm embedding as ongoing practice within myself and also in everyday life situations, because reflective practice you actually need all the time. Even if you just have an argument with your brother, sister, or whatever, you can think about it afterwards. How could I have avoided that? And how did it get triggered in the first place? At that point, could I have, and you always have, the power of decision making, you could have decided to walk away. But you didn't. And why didn't you? So it's that kind of thinking you can practice all the time. And there's a new jargon that I just learned, and that's about, not so good for my language, sorry, curious questioning. So having that kind of way of questioning what's going on, like I demonstrated about reflective questioning. That's really about curious questioning. Have a look what other things played a role. Was this relevant? Was that relevant? Was it my mother butting in? You know, was it me reacting because it's all, I always react about this particular? Is it my sore point? You know, ask those kind of questions of curiosity. And in your daily work in the workplace, they are very important questions. And the newest jargon that I learned was curious questioning. There you are. There's a new one for you. It's not even on the list. And it's only come up recently for me too. Strengths-based. You've probably done some work in that because I have been teaching in your social work course, now 4 years back, but certainly asset-based and strengths-based is certainly what we're working with now. We don't want to go, oh, you poor refugee. We want to go, your refugee experience, what has it brought for you in terms of strengths? You know, you learn to, am I still being strengths-based and how can I do better? So again, in your application, you can bring some of that in. Just the way you understand it. So we just talked about resilience because that's part of the strengths. And you can, in every person, you can find something that they did really well and go from there instead. Patient journey, that's another jargon. It was very much about looking how the patient travels through the hospital. Where are the critical points? Is everybody getting lost finding the pathology? Then we should do something about it. So there was a whole project in the patient's journey. But you could have that, the client's journey or whatever as well. The person that uses public transport, their journey in terms of how many times they have to change, how long they have to wait for the next train. So there's a lot of measuring of journeys these days to be seeing where are the critical points where we can change something. Client voice is really like consumer voice, feedback kind of things, but these days we call it client voice. Goals and aspirations. A lot of it, because of the strengths-based, we talk to the client about what you want to achieve. If you could have anything, what would it be? Can we work towards that or not? What are the little steps we need to work towards that? In the older days, we would just say, all right, I can see your problem. This is what you need to do. Boom, 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 boom. Have they learned anything? Probably not. So it's that working with the goal and aspirations of the person. Place-based means it's local. It's in the Bankstown area with all the things that happen in Bankstown. Not somebody coming out from the city, doing 2 days in Bankstown, then going back to the city. No, it's place-based. It's usually geographic with a lot of other organizations involved. Messaging, it's a bit like the, actually, I just realized, no, it's not like that. Messaging is related to the narrative. I thought I might have done it in opposites, but no. But the first two look like opposites, so sorry about that. So the messaging is sort of similar as the narrative, but messaging would be a bit more directive. How are we going to message that? What narrative are we going to use that the message hits home? It's a bit like that. Client-centered, you'll see that a lot as a jargon, and it's a bit like what I said before around goals and aspirations. We really want to cue in on the client and their needs, not what we interpret to be their needs, which is what we often do. They tell us their problem, we interpret the problem, and then we give advice. No. They need to kind of formulate the problem in a way, and then we can talk about how do you think we could approach solutions, what would work for you. Very different. Facilitative, so you can see that's a facilitative kind of questioning rather than directive. Community development, a very misunderstood concept. So you've got to go with the flow with it, probably. So the classic community development was really democracy bottom-up. Everybody's involved. We developed the community to make decisions. We developed the community to research themselves, about themselves, give input of what it looks like from them and all of that. And then, so it was quite a lengthy process, and that's what you can study. Community development, it comes generally from a lot of the third world countries where you kind of work with a whole village and then try to kind of get the whole village to make those changes themselves with your support. But often community development now is also used just for group work, for working in the community sector, those kind of things. So, so just be careful how you use it. And maybe steer away from it unless you have to, because someone like me that's been around for a long time might think they don't really understand community development. So there you are. There's one that you can look at through your Google or Scholastic Google and have a bit of research around community development. It is complex and so many layers, and so I wouldn't put a whole application on community development unless you really know what that organization might be into. So certainly if they do community development with whole communities, then it's kind of clear, okay? Consumer driven, that's a bit like client-centered. It's just in some industry you use consumer. So if you're going to work with mental health, they usually work with consumers. A lot of the disability services might call them a consumer. We call it a client. Somebody else calls it a participant. Participant usually means it's more equal, the relationship. So that's often in group kind of programs. Access and equity. Now, that is, has been around for a very long time. Quite often understood, still used, particularly in the migrant sector. And we absolutely need it. So access is about being able to get services. We know that in most services sectors, migrants underutilizing services, and it will be the same for Aboriginal people. And it's the same for people with disability and other vulnerable groups like homeless people. So one thing is actually access, actually even getting a service. But equity is about getting equity of outcomes. So a person might be able to actually use the hospital, but are they going to get as good an outcome than somebody that was born here, raised here, well educated? What do you think? No, probably not. So that's what the equity is about. That's about thinking, what do we need to do for them to get equal outcomes? So you need to actually change and adjust and adapt the strategy, because nothing works just for nothing works for everybody. So you've got to actually reshape it. And absolutely, vulnerable people have the right for the same equal outcomes as everybody else. So we've got to do different things about it. So that's an important one to have in my sector. Okay? If you can throw that in, and if you can throw it in the right way, I'll certainly go like, that's good. And that's what you want. You are there to impress a person like me that recruits people with your background all the time. Okay? So that is an important one in my sector. In other sectors, it might be something different. In domestic violence, certainly it will be something different. But certainly in the migrant sector, migrant and refugee sector, absolutely an important concept. Restoration. Any idea? It's not about furniture. What do you think? It's to do with our foster care service. But it's probably going to become more and more a jargon that's going to be used. So restoration is actually restoring a child back into their birth family. So the birth family might have had an issue, a drug issue or whatever. They had to take the children away into foster care. But we know that it's detrimental to be separated from the parents most of the time, also long term. So a lot of work goes in restoring them back in the family and supporting the family. And maybe the family in the meantime was able to get, to become drug-free and is more responsible. So that's what restoration means. EEO, who knows what EEO is? I'm sure a number of you know what EEO is, because it's in almost every certainly government advertisement, and in a lot of NGO advertisements as well, or in the background at least, or in the behaviors at least. Equal employment opportunity. So it means that you need to get the job on a merit base, so there's comparison between people. Again, we think about, why do I respond to this person like that? What is this person bringing over that other person? And it can't be anything about whether you're married, how old you are, whether you live far away, whether your qualifications are higher than what we're looking for. All of those are discriminatory practice. So equal opportunity really means the best for the job. But not just for the job, also for your career. Like, who is it that gets the promotion? Again, you have to apply equal employment opportunity principles. They do work, not always, because sometimes you need to be more assertive about that and actually say, look, we have not enough men in our organization. Or all our men are leaders, and all the people that do the work are women. It's obviously not right. So then there's something wrong with our structure and the way we're recruiting people. So then we would re-examine that equal employment opportunity, and we might have to have affirmative action and say, right, we want more men in the workplace, so how are we going to do it? How are we going to attract them so that they can come through the system, still have merit, but we might say, all things being equal, you've got an equally qualified woman and man. We don't have enough men, so we'll take the men for employment. So it's those kind of things. So it's important for you to know, because otherwise you give the wrong answer for these kind of things. Okay, so lastly, let's talk about the tips. And then please ask me lots of questions after that. It'll be all fine. Paper is patient. That's what my mother already said. But it's something we often forget. Like, you can put anything on paper, you know, beautiful. Then you come from the interview and you go like, all right, the application's definitely been written by somebody else, because that person there doesn't reflect the application at all. So be careful how much you're putting it on, because you're wasting your own time and you're wasting hours too, and that's a real shame. But put things in, but don't waffle on forever in a day either, because we also go like, that person can't focus it properly, you know? They think they need to tell me everything under the sun, but really what I want to know is how they tick, how they think. And that's why you can't just say, yes, I've got this experience, because the others have that experience too. So how am I supposed to compare between this one and that one? You got to give me a bit more, but you can't give me a whole story either, because I don't have time to read it all. Okay, so we can talk a little bit more about the actual application. Volunteer work, as I mentioned before, you can gain a lot of skills from volunteer work. We also appreciate volunteer work. So in the whole sector, though we don't agree that people should work for free, but there is a place for volunteers. Most of the industries have to use volunteers. And for you to volunteer in our sector, it's like saying, I'm interested enough to work in your sector to give my time for free. That is a very, very strong message. So use it if you do volunteer work. Link your application to your placement or any practical experience. Look, a lot of you do, I don't want to call it small jobs, I don't want to diminish it, but a lot of you do, you know, jobs waitressing, bars, shops selling, you know, all sorts of things that you might be doing that you think is not related to where you want to go. But some of the core skills are nevertheless related. Just like what you learned at university and your academic learning, you also learn a lot on the job wherever you are. How to relate to customers, how to bring up a difficult issue with the job, how to keep order, how to think about what the consumer wants, those kind of things, how to get there punctually, in time, reasonably dressed, all those kind of things. You have experience. Maybe you can't put that in an interview, but some things you can certainly, into an application, but some things you can certainly put in your application. I've got 6 years work experience, working part-time, for Best and Less, where I manage this, that, whatever. You know, like, it's those kind of things where you can say, oh yeah, that's a mature person. They had some exposure in the workplace. They know about consumers and their complaints and how to anticipate that. You know, you can be assertive about those things. Don't say, I haven't got much work experience that's relevant, but I do a bit of work in a shop. How positive does that sound? Not very. So use it to your advantage. Find out what the organization is passionate about. You've been just listening for an hour to me, and what I'm passionate about, I'm your future employer, more or less, if you go for our jobs. But there's many like me. You saw my career. I worked in many different community services sector plus government. So imagine you're going for a job at our organization. You absolutely need to know what I'm passionate about. Not what I'm passionate about as Astrid, because you don't know me yet and you haven't met me yet, but what my organization is passionate about, because that's why I'm working for them and I'm recruiting for them. So I want people that are passionate about the same things that I am passionate about. So you look on the internet. And many of your generation, you are fantastic at that, aren't you? You don't believe how many people come to an interview and they have not even looked at our website. They have not even bothered to find out anything about our organization. You really think, I think that's a really motivated person? I don't think so. I also think it's quite disrespectful because they haven't shown that they actually want to work with us. And okay, maybe they've done it because they have to do it because of their job active provider and they don't really want to work with us. Then I understand that, but you can just let us know and say, look, I applied for you. Organization, I probably know that I won't get it, but I have to apply for 10 jobs and blah, blah, blah. Fine. We'll just say that's fine. If they ring us, we tell them that you were unsuccessful. No problem. But we're very time poor, so we want to make it the best match for the people that we see in interviews. So yeah, just check out the websites. There's plenty of information around about us. Use the right jargon, so we've gone through that, but there is kind of a bit of a community services jargon that it's good to use. You don't need to use all on my list, but just when you read the website, you'll pick it up. You can see our mission statement, our goals, our programs, the language we use for that. You can pick it up. So you have to actually prove to me that you really want it. That's what this is all about. Because there's plenty out there that actually really want it. They're the people that I look for. Okay? So personal information, you should minimize it. So let me give you an example. Quite a lot of people put in there that they're married. Is it relevant? No, it shouldn't be relevant. And it isn't relevant. And can I ask you, will any of the men put in that they're married? What do you think? Less likely. Much less likely. Okay? Because it isn't relevant. Of course, men are going to be called Mr. all their life, aren't they? Not Miss and then Mrs. And then, you know, we signal they're changed, they're married. I don't want to know. It's irrelevant. We don't need to know about children. Don't need to know your religion. All those private things are irrelevant because it is about the job. And if you put these, and we don't want to know your age, because we know age is a discrimination factor. In fact, marriage is a discrimination factor. I had somebody in an interview asking me, and when do you have time for your husband? I didn't take the job. I wasn't going to work for someone like that. Because my husband's irrelevant to my professional life. So don't put all those things in. And in fact, if you do put them in, my initial thinking will be, they don't understand social justice, they don't understand discrimination, and they probably don't understand the sector. It doesn't mean I'm going to put it straight aside, of course not. I'll have another look. But it's just those little things that go like, then there's another and another and then you're going to go on the left-hand side instead of the right-hand side. And I know it sounds callous, but I want to give you a true picture. I don't want to pretend. Because if I get 60 applications, and sometimes we do, I've got to use something to make decisions because I can't interview 60 of you. It's just impossible. So I've got to narrow it down, and sometimes it might be unfair towards someone, and they might be the best person, but I've got to use criteria. And so then when you get many little question marks, then, yeah, then it can be that I'm getting clouded. I'm human too. I try not to, but every now and then you just have to say, well, look, that person will never fit. Now, please don't run scared. Happy to talk some more about it. And your tutors are happy to walk you through, I'm sure. But I just wanted to give you a true picture how an assessment, you know, how a job application assessment kind of works. Of course, it's not only me. In my sector, we're usually 3 people. So all 3 of us do it without talking to each other. We all have a look. Then we come together to our top 5 or something like that. Okay? So somebody else might say, yeah, Astrid, I know, they look like they're not politically correct and all that, or don't fit all that well into our thing. But I also think they bring this, they bring that, and then we might say, okay, let's see them, let's interview them. And look, they might just blow us away. And then when they start with us, then I'll tell them about it. Why I had a couple of question marks on that in our industry. Don't put down your merit because, you know, it is not relevant to absolutely anything. And we do know it brings discrimination because then people think, oh, then she's going to have a child soon, then she's going to be off for a year and all that kind of thing. And the research is there. That's how it often works. So, right. Where are we? Oh, yeah, okay. So confident, assertive, but not over the top. So we get both scenarios. I get often people that say, I'm the best for the job. And what would I be thinking? What do you think that says to me? Apart from thinking you're a bit cocky, it also says to me, or I'd be thinking, actually, excuse me, I make that decision, not you. Yes, I know you have this experience, that experience, that experience, but how do you know that you're the best in comparison to the person that's going to walk in next? You might be the best, and they might be the better best. I know that's not a word, but, you know, you can't make that decision. So, and then if you think about it from the broader cultural stuff, it's probably, and this is well documented, this is not me, it's well documented that in the Australian sort of psyche, and I know we're diverse, but say in the older Australian sort of psyche, people that put themselves up front very assertive are not well received. So don't do it too much. So be assertive and say, look, I think I'm suitable for this job because I've done this, I've done that, you know, I want to work in the industry, I have personal experience, and I have this work experience, and I have those skills and all that. Be assertive about your skills and why you think you're suitable, but don't say, I'm the best. It just is cringe. We also get other people that are on the opposite side and that are not very confident. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. In some cultures, you don't look people straight in the eye necessarily. Or in some cultures, absolutely unacceptable to put yourself in front because it might be a more collective thinking culture, or it might be a more shy sort of culture in itself. Then we have to kind of allow for that. But if you are aware of it, then you would, and if you did some reflective thinking, you would know that you're a shy person, and you would practice not to be a loud person, but practice to actually say, look, I think I'm good at researching. Because the feedback I have received, you know, from my lectures has been positive. My assignments I usually have in between A's and B's. My comments are usually particularly around well-structured, well-thought-out argument. You can say it just like a normal conversation because you've got the evidence, you've got the proof. And when we ring the referee, we'd ask that sort of question. Look, they said they have strong research skills. What's your opinion? You know? Then the referee will reconfirm it. So it's a skill. Practice it. So the question down here was, how well is a referee received? That might be a tutor or a lecturer. Because you're coming straight out of uni, it's kind of a logical thing. Usually, what we look for is at least one work-related one. So depending how you write your argument, it becomes work-related, your tutor and the lecturer, I guess. But you can also use them as your more personal and character referee if you did have a supervisor. So if you then also did part-time work for KFC or something like that, you can also use that supervisor. Or you can use somebody that that might be a friend of the family or something like that as a character reference. So the tutors and the lecturers are kind of a combination, but we certainly wouldn't dismiss that in any way because you've got a right to put your referee forward. And you could make an argument why you're using them referees. You know, you could say, as this is a research-related, you know, application, my referees are my lecturers and tutors. That's fine, perfectly all right. But if it is a job at Centrelink frontline, where you're saying hello and you're assessing people and then you move them on to something else, maybe your customer service supervisor might be a better supervisor because in Centrelink, it'll say customer service experience, you know. So you have to weigh it up. And of course, that's the other thing. You don't use the same supervisors all the time. Just the same as you don't use the same application all the time. So we get applications. You can see exactly that it was not written for that job. What do you think we think of an application like that? Didn't care enough. Lazy. Sorry. I mean, yes. I mean, of course, underlying is that they didn't care enough about the job. But they might have actually cared for it, but are not motivated enough to really give it a go. Or they think it's good enough. And then do I want the person that thinks easily it's good enough? Is that respectful? Not exactly. So, but I have to say, it also, again, hasn't been a reason that I might have rejected the interview. There might have to be other things. Because I probably would give the benefit of doubt and probably would say, all right, okay, you know, they might have written 30 or 40 or 50, you know. But it's got to be still close, at least. Some of them are not even close, so you don't even bother reading the rest, you know. And I have to say, to be honest, I also go to the CV first often before I read the criteria. Not for entry jobs so much, but for later management jobs, because you know the industry. So you know if they worked for, whatever, I don't want to say the organizations, but if they work for a large charity that I know, if they work for the neighborhood center down the road, if they work for Centrelink, if they work for health, you know a little bit what environment they come from because you've got enough experience to kind of judge that. So yes, I usually look at the CV first. And that brings me back to the paper, is patient. You know, you get a lot of people that say, I'm motivated, my career goal is this. You know the little thing up the top in the box that says, I'm a patient person, I love people, all those beautiful statements. Paper is patient. I don't read them very often. Because it doesn't make any difference. Because you can write there anything you like. I can't prove it, whether you're passionate or not, till I meet you. Or till I see a passionate answer to criteria. Then I might think, that's a really passionate person. So don't put too much effort in there, or even don't use it. I don't use it if I apply somewhere. I don't use it on my CV because, as I said, anybody can say anything there. So it's a bit, and usually you can see it's developed by a career planner or something like that. So, yeah, it's a bit neither here nor there in my view. Any other questions? Because I do think that's our last slide. Yeah, that is our last slide. So, so any other questions? Sorry. Yeah. Yes. The question was around if there was a criteria on equity and diversity, what would be a good answer, or how would you answer that to demonstrate your passion for it as well? So I probably would start off with a statement around the benefits of diversity to Australia. Around, if you are from a diverse background, you would say something about the diversity of family, the meaning of culture, how you negotiated culture from being from a diverse background yourself. But if you are not, then you can also talk something around what it has meant to Australia, the change, even that you're moving in a diverse environment, which you're enjoying, something positive about diversity. And if you know something about productive diversity, you might want to put that in as well, because it has open tourism, it has open trade between Australia and other countries, and it has made Australia more world open. So you can say some positive things about diversity. Then you can say something, but I do know that people of diverse backgrounds and varied backgrounds have a number of issues maybe to, for example, in their career, schooling, being newly arrived, they might have language issues. So you tell me something around the issues they might have, so I can see, okay, this person is thinking what it can mean for a diverse person. And then you lead from there into equity around, as a service, you know, it's important to address those kind of barriers and disadvantages, and that you are aware that there could be, that there are often equity programs that would ensure that people have a good access to the services and those kind of things. And then you would leave it at that, because you told me that you like diversity, that you know that some disadvantages are associated with it, and that you know that there's equity programs that try to work at minimizing the disadvantage. So I already know how you tick, how you think, what makes you the person who you are, that you understand something about it, and that you're quite passionate about diversity. That's all I need to know, really, because that stands for my organization. So we feel the same about that. So you don't need to, as you can see, you don't need to write a whole story. And I came then, and then I went to school 5 years, and all of that sort of thing. Not really. But you also can't say, and we get that a lot, because we are a multicultural organization, we also get, well, I'm a migrant, therefore I understand a migrant. So all the migrants are the same, you think? And does that really mean you've reflected on it? What it means to live in a diverse, you know, society, what it means with intercultural kind of relations? When you say that to me, I'm a migrant, therefore I understand migrants, then I'm thinking you haven't reflected much on it as such. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure to come here today, and good luck with your job search. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If I can just ask you now to thank Astrid for the time and for questions and answering all your questions. So thank you, Astrid, and I'm hoping we'll see you in the coming semester as well.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure, always.